Welcome to Leading the Next Generation with Tim Elmore, where our mission is to empower the emerging generations with skills to lead in real life. Welcome back, podcast listeners. Andrew here, and we are so honored and excited to be joined by Jon Acuff. Jon Acuff is the New York Times best-selling author of 9 books, including Soundtracks, Your New Playlist, and the Wall Street Journal #1 bestseller, Finish, Give Yourself the Gift of Done. When he's not writing or recording his popular podcast, All It Takes Is a Goal, Acuff can be found on a stage as one of INC's top 100 leadership speakers. He's spoken to hundreds of thousands of people at conferences, colleges, and companies around the world, including FedEx, Range Rover, Microsoft, Nokia, and Comedy Central. His new book, All It Takes Is a Goal, the 3-step plan to ditch regret and tap into your massive potential, is releasing very soon. And you can find out more about this book at jonacuff.com. Well, I think you're going to love this conversation today, so take it away, Tim.
Well, Jon, you have been a friend and you have been both an engaging communicator as well as a great author.
Thank you.
How many best-selling books have you written? You've written a lot of books. How many would you say have
this
been?
Will be this is my 9th book will come out this fall, and then I'm turning in a 10th book the same week this other one comes out. So yeah, I really enjoy doing it, and so it's been a fun few years.
That's awesome. Well, I want to talk about your book, All It Takes Is a Goal. It's a fun title, and all of us would say, yeah, I try to set goals. I need to set goals. Mm-hmm. But most of it would say we don't do all that we should. So can I begin by saying you start in your new book by saying, I didn't think about living up to my full potential until I was about 45 years old.
Yeah.
That's kind of surprising for me to hear about you because I feel like you've accomplished so much so early.
Yeah. So I was telling a friend that the other day, there was a 3 or 4 year gap between my book Finish and my book Soundtracks. Like I just got stuck, and he said the same thing. Like, no, but you've done other books, and I was like, yeah, but you can still be stuck. And so for me, what happened was the moment I kind of realized, I really want to live into my potential was we were touring a college with my oldest daughter that I had attended, and my wife attended the same college, and we were sitting there and we're walking around, and my wife said, wasn't college amazing? And I said, no, it was a train wreck. Like it was terrible. And I was looking at these 4 years where I didn't make much of myself. I got rejected from a fraternity. I didn't have real relationships. And I drove home to Nashville with this sense of regret, but I had just written this book called Soundtracks about mindset. So I knew that I had the power to choose my mindset and change my mindset. So I thought, okay, instead of sitting in that regret, like, what can I do with it? What can I learn how to, those were 4 years. Those are 4 years. I might have 40 or 50 ahead of me. How can I live into my potential there? And so I got really curious about that. And that was, it was in my mid 40s of saying, okay, what else am I capable of? And so then I asked 3,000 people. I did a survey with this PhD named Mike Peasley. He's a professor here in Nashville where I live. We asked 3,000 people. 96% of people said they weren't living up to their potential.
Wow.
And so then I knew, okay, it's not just me. It's worth spending a few years trying to work on this answer to this question and create some tactical things you can do. So that's what kind of got me into this particular topic.
Interesting. So what I love about what you just said is it wasn't just a theory or a quote unquote book idea. You were living out. I don't think I am.
The best, Tim, for me, I won't say this for everybody else, but for me, the best books are written with my heart, not with my hands. Yeah. You can read a book and go, that person wrote that book with their hands. It's technically true. It's an idea, but you can tell they haven't lived it. There's not a texture to it. The best humor is true. The best, in my opinion, best nonfiction, at least self-help kind of books that I write. So I was in the trenches. And then the fun thing for me was, because I've changed my writing process, now when I have an idea, I test it with hundreds of real people before it hits the book. The book is the last thing. So what happens is, with this book, there's 40 real stories from real people that tested the ideas and say, okay, as a single mom, this is how I applied it. As a retiree, as a college student. So I'm not guessing that it'll help. I go, wow, we tested it. We changed it. We grew it. I know this will be helpful because we've already, like, I'm 47, like, God forbid I write another memoir type book. Like,
Yes.
at some point you can't be like, I found another section of my life that is memoir worthy as a 47-year-old who hasn't been to Mars. Like, at some point you have to be like, dude, you got to get over those, like do some books that help a ton of people. And I hope that's what this is one.
Absolutely. John, you just reminded me of why I like you so much. So I think when I first met you, you were doing even more comedy than you were perhaps teaching. Do you mind if we just take a trail for 1 minute?
Of course, dude. Love trails. Let's go.
Okay. Well, Comedy Central, you've been such a funny person. Would you mind just sharing for our listeners how that comedy thing got going and then maybe turned into it's funny, but it also has a message?
Yeah. So I grew up with humor as a value system. My dad's a pastor. And he planted a church in Massachusetts in the 80s, Southern Baptist Church. There were like 2. And so he couldn't coast on cultural faith to try to share what he was doing. Like, he had to rely on humor and pop culture and other things. In our family, it was a value system. Like, we cared about it. When I turned 18, my dad would take me to comedy clubs and we'd go see like Carrot Top and Brian Regan. So I grew up around it. And then I always loved it as an ability to share an idea. Yeah. So Chris Rock says there's some things people won't listen to unless they're laughing at the same time.
It's true. It is true.
And so I love to use it as a way to share an idea. I love it as a vehicle for truth. I love it as a way to like blow up an idea so large you can't ignore it. And so like when I give examples or when I tell stories, so like I did this story for a couple, like COVID happened, and then I did it probably like a year or 2 after COVID about overthinking. And my story in my speech would be, overthinking was an epidemic, and then the pandemic happened. And if you weren't overthinking before, you definitely are now. And I would go, because everything is a thing. So the story I would do is I'd say, and this is a true story, the first time I went to a live event after the pandemic chilled, somebody went to shake my hand and I thought, am I supposed to refuse? Am I supposed to fist bump? Should I twist at the hips because the hips don't lie? And I would, and that's a Shakira reference. And then I would say, should I give them an elbow? And I'd say, remember where you're pterodactyling each other, elbowing each other for that month? And and then I'd say, maybe I'll shake their hand, but I'll put my entire arm into a vat of hand sanitizer up to the elbow, as if to say, excuse me 1 second while I scrub off this deadly pandemic he's just tried to murder me and my grandparents with.
That's right.
Like, just 1 second. So like I'm layering. So instead of just saying there was a lot of overthinking that happened because of the pandemic, I isolate an example, or then I'd go, the other problem, like, you used to be amazing at the grocery store. For the first 99% of your life, you were so good at walking down the aisle of the grocery store. But during the pandemic, you were like, which is this, up aisle, down aisle? Like, I don't want to fail this grocery store run and have my neighbors publicly shame me. Like, you used to be so good at chips, so I'm using those stories around a sensitive subject to expand it and have everyone in the crowd go, oh yeah, he's right. Like, a lot of life got really awkward, like simple things that I used to not think about. Cause then I'd end it with, do you know what I thought about 5 years ago when somebody tried to shake my hand? Nothing. I just shook their hand, but now everything. Yeah. And so I love humor that way. So I would say I watch 100 comedians for every one business speaker, as far as like a study process.
How about that? Yeah.
And so it's definitely a tool, I feel, and it's one that I've tried to hone and use to the best of my abilities. And it became a separator for me. There's just not a lot of funny business books. And so it became this kind of fun niche.
You're so right. And I'm hearing you say in the subtext, it just lubricates hard topics or issues or friction.
When it's honest. Comedy is honest. So like when somebody, you've had guests that won't break the character. So like they have a character, and like there's no getting around and being like, you ever mow your own yard? Like there's no, like we've all interviewed people like that. We're like, okay, like I'm getting just full character. And I think humor is honest and goes, hey, here's a thing that didn't work out, or hey, here's something funny that happened to me. So I think there's a degree of honesty there too, where people are able to go, oh yeah, okay, this is a real person. Like this is a funny, honest person. So yeah, I love it. I try to put as much as I can in the books. But I really do love the funny point, like that rhythm. Like I did comedy a couple times and it was pure comedy and I enjoyed it. It was really challenging, but I have that muscle now where I like to go, and here's what that means, or here's how that helps. So I don't know that I'd ever be a pure comedian at this point, because I do really enjoy here's how this idea could change your life. That's not a silver medal part of content for me. That's gold. And I enjoy that.
Yeah. Well, you do it well.
Oh, thanks.
So talk to us about, in this book, the vision wall, the first roadblock we encounter when we're setting goals. You offer an unexpected alternative approach to potential.
Yeah.
And the first part of that approach involves looking through the rearview mirror instead of looking ahead at the windshield. Talk about the strategy.
So the problem is when people want something more. So you come to it like maybe you hit a career stall out, like maybe you lost your job in the economy, you hit some stuck moment. They automatically think, okay, I've got to figure out the rest of my life. People ask questions like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, what's your 10-year plan? What's your why? And it becomes this huge vision wall where you think you have to know the vision before you start. And it's where entrepreneurs have a vision wall. In entrepreneurship right now, especially online, they'll say, you got to know your niche. You got to niche. The phrase is niche to get rich. So you don't sell flowers. You have to sell a specific type of flower, or you don't write big books. You write a specific type of, which is crazy when you think about it, because it would be like me saying to you, what's your favorite meal that's Southern Cambodian? And you were like, I've never had Southern Cambodian. I'm like, not Northern, Southern. And you would say, I've never tried any of it. I don't know. Like, that would be crazy. And so we get this fear, though, that we have to have it all figured out. And I got stuck there. I feel paralyzed by the question, like, what's your 10-year vision? And so when I was stuck there, I realized, okay, I can't dream forward. I'm having a hard time with that. And everybody I talk to has the same hard time. What if there's something we can learn from the past? And it's this often ignored part of our lives. We do say that, like, you don't look back, you're not going that direction. Yeah. And then I think culturally, we're kind of addicted to sadness and trauma right now as a culture. For every 100 scientific papers written on sadness, there's only one written on joy. So we don't do exercises where we go back and look at things that give us joy, as if there's no value. Every counselor I've been to, there's been a lot of, well, let's figure out the trauma. I drew a trauma egg in one counseling setting where I had to draw a picture of every bad thing that had happened. Every small group my wife and I have ever been part of, when we share our stories at the beginning, it becomes 6 weeks of everybody crying about the terrible parts of their marriage. And I thought, what if instead I made a list of all the things that I love over the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Like, what if that could teach me about who I am? And I did this exercise, and it's a crazy exercise. It's so simple, but what happens, and then I taught it to a bunch of people, hundreds of people, and I would say, come up with 30 items, and they would come up with 300, 200. Like they would. And what always happens is there's this moment where you go, I want more of that. Like, I want more, like, so the past all of a sudden helps you plan the future, because you go, these are oh my gosh, like I'm wired for these things. I didn't know, I'd lost touch with some of them. I want more in my future. And so now you've got this great desire for things that you can achieve with a goal. Like, that's kind of the on-ramp. Like, because nobody changes just because. I've never met a single person that said, I just decided to get disciplined. I just woke up one day and I was like, it's time to have grit just because, like, no particular reason, just today I'm going to. And so the desire makes you want to do the goal, and then there's steps to do it.
That's good. Yeah. All behavior has a reason, doesn't it?
Yep.
So John, let's talk about the best moments list that you have in the book. It's a very intriguing concept. What's the best moments list?
Yeah. So that list that's what the exercise becomes. So you create this massive list, and then where it gets powerful is you categorize it. So what happens, Tim, is you come up with 50 items, 100 items, and there's 4 categories that every item is going to fit in. So it'll either be a relationship moment, it'll be an experience moment, an accomplishment, or an object. So let me give you an example of how that breaks down. If you go hike by yourself and it's a beautiful hike and you love the hike, that's an experience. If you go hike with a friend who's going through a divorce and you are able to really encourage them, that's a relationship moment. If you hike it faster than you've ever hiked it before, that's an accomplishment. If you grab a rock from the top that reminds you can do hard things, that's an object. So what happens is people then would categorize their lists, and it becomes this it's in my opinion, one of the best personality tests that's ever been designed, because in every personality test, there's some degree of should that slips in for me. Yeah. I should, like, they'll go, do you care about people? And I'm like, oh, I should answer yes. Yep. Like sometimes I don't, but I'm gonna. So with this, you're not guessing the things. Like you're writing down, it's a history exercise, not a fantasy exercise. And so what happens is people do their list, they'll categorize it, which is so simple. And then they'll go, wow, 60% of my list is relationship focused. No wonder I feel stuck. I'm really lonely right now.
Yeah.
So like, wow, 60% of my list is accomplishment focused, but I grew up in a family where accomplishment was frowned upon. I was supposed to play it small, even though I feel naturally wired to accomplish. What if I built more accomplishments into my life? What if I built more? And so it becomes this unexpected life plan that does give you that view of the future, just in a counterintuitive way.
Yeah, that's good. One of the big ideas in the book is you talk about zones. Okay. Most of us are familiar with the term, the comfort zone, but you talk about the chaos zone, and then the zone we want to hang out in is, well, how do you define potential in between the two? What would
the potential to me, my definition is the gap between your vision and your reality.
Okay,
so
say that again.
Potential is the gap between your vision and your reality.
Okay,
so
good.
I have this vision of who I want to be, the type of father, the type of business owner, whatever, and then I have my reality, and there's a big gap between those two things. And in the middle of that is your potential. So the zones came about because I kept studying high performers, and it was wild that being a high performer doesn't mean you're a high achiever. Doesn't automatically mean you're a high achiever. We all know people who are capable of sporadic bursts of performance, but they don't turn it into long-term sustainable careers, long-term sustainable relationships. And what happens is high performers, and if you're listening to this podcast, congrats, you're a high performer. And I can say that authentically because low performers don't voluntarily listen to podcasts like this. They don't even know this category exists. So congratulations already. You're a high performer. But what happens is high performers live between three zones. The comfort zone, which we all know, imagine that's in the end of one line. The other end of the line is the chaos zone. And so the chaos zone is where you try to do everything all at once. Yeah. So you'll often see people go, they'll get inspired, they'll be stuck in the comfort zone, and they'll get inspired by New Year's resolution or a podcast or a conference, and they'll swing all the way over and they'll go, I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to volunteer more at church. I'm going to date my spouse, and I'm going to do it all this weekend. And it creates crazy chaos, and they never get momentum because they can't do it all at once. And so then they swing back to the comfort zone. And that's why we have the phrase yo-yo diet in our culture. Because people yo-yo back and forth. They yo-yo from I'm not exercising at all to I'm tracking every macro and micro, and I'm weighing my food on a scale designed for Tour de France cyclists. Like I'm all, and then they, you can't sustain it and they swing back. And in the middle of those is the potential zone. So Goldilocks zone, not too hot, not too cold.
That's right.
Not too much, not too little. It's just right. And that's what's really fun is when you figure out how to live in that zone.
I love that. That totally makes sense. And by the way, that is so American, isn't it? To move into chaos. I was doing horrible. Now I'm going to be the best of the best of the best. Tonight, I'm doing it all. Right. Like I'm doing it all. Like we have this belief in new person syndrome where I can be a new person, and I'll meet people and they'll tell me their goals and I'll go, so I guess tomorrow, completely new person. They're like, yeah. Like, and they'll say goals about things I know they don't want. I know they wouldn't like even if they got. And I'll go, well, who's doing this goal? And they'll go, me. I'll go, you're going to be a new person, I guess, for this to happen. And so you just get really stuck in that chaos. And we talk about the comfort zone a ton. I don't think we talk nearly enough about the chaos zone. That's good. So now I want to shift gears a little bit. You also discuss 3 types of goals in the book. Mm-hmm. And I'd like you now for our listeners to distinguish between easy, middle, and what you call guaranteed goals.
Yeah. So the problem with goals for most people is that they have a goal. And they have this, imagine a ladder. They have this ladder and it's 12 feet tall and it only has 2 rungs, one at the very top and one at the very bottom. So the very top says, write a book or start a podcast or lose 50 pounds or whatever. And then the rung at the bottom is the first day and they don't have any rungs between there. And they think, okay, I guess I just have to jump as high as I've ever jumped, 12 feet high, 2 feet higher than a basketball rim, and grab that top rung and then just pull my way up. And what I like to come and say is, what if we built a ladder that had rungs every 6 inches? Ooh. Like, could you climb that ladder? You think you can get to the top of that ladder if there were that many rungs? And they go, yeah, that would be a really easy ladder to climb. And that's what I mean by easy, middle, guaranteed. So easy goals are those first small goals you do. it's easing into whatever activity. So if somebody said to me, John, I want to write a book, I'd say, great. Don't write a book, write a chapter. Or don't even write a chapter, write a page. Like, what are some easy goals we can do? And then the middle goals are when you start to expand the amount of time you're doing it, the amount of effort, like how you're investing. And guaranteed goals are those goals at the top where if you've got the progress, it becomes guaranteed. Like, for instance, I can tell anybody, like, if you run 30 miles this month and you ran 0 miles last month, you're guaranteed to be in better shape this month. Like, that's not a miracle. That's not magic. It's just you've climbed the ladder. And so that's what I mean by guaranteed goals, is that by the time you get to the middle of the ladder, that thing is happening. Like, it would be hard for it not to happen. So for me, like, imagine if I only had one top goal that said, finish the book, like write a book. Yeah. Every day of the year, I'd feel like a failure because every day I wouldn't achieve that goal. But instead, I have this ladder. And one day the rung says, write 20 words. One day it says, talk to Tim on a podcast. One day it says, write the subtitle. And I'm climbing the ladder. By the end of the year, if I'm faithful, it's hard for me not to have a finished book. Like, I guarantee. So Tim, I couldn't have written about guaranteed goals in my first book because I had no proof. I had no evidence. Like, it would have been a theory, but not something I believed in. Yeah. But as I release book number 9 and turn in book number 10 and tell people, hey, if you do goals in the right way, like, you're guaranteed, these results. Now the challenge is you have to make the goal something you control. The trick with a guaranteed goal is it has to be something you control. So for instance, I don't control the number of books I sell. I really don't. Like, I don't control the book catching fire. I don't control somebody giving it to Oprah. Like, those would not be good guaranteed goals. There's other things I do control, though. Like, I control how often I write. I control how often I talk about it online. Like, I know if I talk about it 100 times this month and I talked about it 0 times next month, I'm guaranteed to have better results. That's not, again, not confusing. So a big part of it is making sure it's a goal that's within your control. When authors tell me my goal is to hit the New York Times bestsellers list, I say it's not a great goal. Yeah,
that's out of your control. Yeah,
it's out of your control. It'd be great if it happened. It'd be great if it happened. It's not a great goal, and here's why. And so I'll unpack that and go, I can't guarantee that one. Like, you don't have any control over that one. I don't have any control over that one. Let's find one you do have control over, because you're going to get really encouraged by that control.
I love what you're saying, and I'll tell you why. I remember talking to loads and loads of university students over the years, and I would talk to them about goals that they'd set that were out of their control. And I would say, if I were to tell you to go on vacation, I can't guarantee you're going to have a great vacation, but I can send you to an environment like Hawaii and this particular hotel. Yeah. And I'm creating an environment that's very likely to create. Yeah. And that's really what you're saying. There's some things in your control that put you in a great chance, a great opportunity to reach them. Is that kind of what you're saying?
So, the other thing is, by the time you get to the middle of the ladder, you have proof. So I always say, not every easy goal turns into a guaranteed goal. I do some easy things in my life that I don't focus on long-term. Yeah. But every guaranteed goal should start with an easy goal. So I put in the book, I'm going to sell 1 million copies of books in my career. I didn't start with that goal the first book I wrote. That would have been egotistical, overwhelming, discouraging. Yeah. But I'm in the middle of the ladder. Like, I can see where the math is going. I know if I continue to faithfully produce books, it'll be impossible for me not to sell 1 million books. So my thing there is, the easy goals you do give you confidence and evidence you can do a middle goal. The middle goals you do give you confidence and evidence you can do a guaranteed goal. Yeah. So as you climb that ladder, it gets easier and easier to go, that's happening. Like, that is like, that's 100%. And here's the other thing. So we talked about nobody changes just because. When you find something you care about, you want to throw time at it. You want to throw effort at it. So I lived in Atlanta. I lived up in Alpharetta. And I didn't decide to wake up early one day because it was good for me. I started the blog and realized, wow, I really like this blogging thing. And I've got 2 kids under the age of 4. I've got a wife. I've got a full-time job. I've got an Atlanta commute. Like, the only way I'm going to be able to throw time at it is if I start getting up earlier. Yeah. And the desire led to the change. And I thought about it, hours were like logs and I was throwing more logs in the fire. So I always try to encourage people, like, I want you to have something you care about so much that Netflix gets boring. Like you're bored
Yeah.
of Netflix, you're
Yeah.
bored of Instagram, because this other thing is so great and you don't have to force yourself to do it.
Yes.
Like
Right.
I couldn't stop writing books if I wanted to right now.
Mhm.
Like it's too late. It's too late. I enjoy it. Like I'm in, like I see the benefits, like the ROI is too much fun. So like
Yeah.
this is happening.
I love that. So take a minute, John, now and talk about the whole notion of fueling those goals. You talk
Yeah.
about that, and I think that's a differentiator in this book. Talk about that.
Yeah. So the fuel thing came really from my own life. About 2 or 3 years ago, I signed the biggest book deal I'd had, and it should have been this moment of celebration, but my wife pulled me aside and was like, "Hey, like this isn't going to go well." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Well, you're a jerk for the 2 years when you write a book. You're a jerk for the 2 years when you sell a book. And I would rather you be a happy plumber than a miserable writer." And so she was right. And what she was saying was that years before in Atlanta, 12 years ago, I started an ad agency that failed tremendously. But I learned something in it that I can function in a crisis. That's a good, true soundtrack. I wrote this book about soundtracks. It's true, helpful kind. But unfortunately, your thoughts don't stay positive accidentally. Like nothing gets accidentally awesome. I tell people that all the time. I've never met somebody that was like, yeah, I was just binge watching Netflix. Next thing I knew, I was doing burpees. I don't even remember getting off the couch. Like I'm flipping tractor tires. I don't even own a tractor. Like it was just, I accidentally got in shape. And so if you don't work on your thoughts over time, they tend to mutate and tend to get negative. They call it negativity bias. So for me, what happened was it went from I can function in a crisis to I function best in a crisis. And then eventually it mutated into I need a crisis to function.
Wow.
And now, and everybody listening to this has worked with a leader that has crisis as a fuel. Because what happens is if you work with a leader who's great at putting out fires, what happens when there's no more fires? Like they feel worthless, and leaders don't like feeling worthless. So they start another fire. Now you don't work with a leader, you work with an arsonist. So that's what Jenny was saying. Jenny was saying, you're using stress and chaos and fear and anger and all these things to fuel you. And it's accomplished some stuff. Like at that point, I'd written 7 or 8 books. Like it had accomplished stuff, but it wasn't going to be a long-term fuel. And that's where like you'll see an 80-year-old that's miserable and really rich. And you're like, how can both of those things exist in the same person? It's like, well, because their fuel for 80 years has been proving somebody wrong. And like maybe their dad died 20 years ago and they're still trying to prove their dad wrong. Like there's no end, like that fuel is eating them up. So that's where the fuel exercise came from, was again, something in my own life where I was like, I got to find a different fuel because I want long-term sustainable growth. I want to be the person I think I'm capable of. But the metaphor I used for it is, like when a rocket leaves the atmosphere, they use rocket boosters, and because that's powerful, it gets them out of the atmosphere. But then once they're out of the atmosphere, they have to drop the rocket boosters because you can't control a rocket booster. It only does one thing: extreme aggression. So when they get out of the atmosphere, they use a solid source of fuel that they can manipulate more. And it's the same for me. I was like, okay, if there's other galaxies for me to explore. What are the fuels going to be that get me there? That's where the fuel kind of discussion came up, and it ended up looking at impact and craft and community, like that there were deeper fuels that I could tap into.
Yeah. And you stay married. That's kind of nice.
Yeah. It's very nice. Yeah. It's like, I always say, like, if my business like does well and my marriage fails, like my business has been a failure too. Like I don't want that. Like it's not where I'm trying to do this. And I refuse to believe you have to be a leader that has a failed anything. Like I don't, like where you go, oh, well, yeah, they're really mean, but they get a lot done. Or they're really like, there's some leaders I meet where I'm like, that person is miserable. And so are the people around them. And the results they're getting, you're like, yeah, they're good results. But I always want, like, I wish somebody would do a conference where you could have honest conversations with the people on the other side of the people. Cause like, I sometimes look at people and they're like, you got to work 80, 90 hours a week. And I'm like, you got no friends. Like you got to work 80, 90 hours a week. Your kids don't know your name. You got to I want to be, I don't believe in balance. I think that's kind of a myth, but I want to be deliberate about having goals in all the parts of my life. So let me give you an example. I wanted to be a better friend. Like I realized I was lonely. I wasn't being a good friend. I was isolating. And so that's too vague. I can't do anything with that. I can't measure it. Like, that's so fuzzy. That's how most goals are. So I said, I'm going to really turn it into a goal. If I want to be a better friend and all it takes is a goal, I'm going to build a goal. So I said, all right, I'm going to encourage one person every day for a month. I'm going to make a list of them so that I don't get stuck in the middle. I don't want to be a Tuesday in the afternoon going, who should I encourage? So I made a list of them. I would text friends and I would say, Jeremy Coward, he's one of my friends. I would say, man, anytime I think about creativity, you're the person I think of. Like, I love watching you create art. It's so fun. And I didn't have a single person that month write me back and go, you don't know how bad it was to get this today. This was the wrong time for me to get this message. 90% of them said, you don't know how much I needed that today. Like, you don't know the stuff that's going on. And so then once the test works and I go, that was that, I feel like I'm a better friend. There's a guaranteed goal, by the way. If you encourage 30 people for a month, you're a better friend at the end of that month. You don't have, like, when people go, you can't guarantee goals. I'm like, I can guarantee some of them. Like, if I encourage 30 people at the end of the month, I'm seen as an encourager. Like, that's not. So then I take the goal and I go, what if I encourage my kids 30 days in a row? Like, I just, instead of 30 different people, what if I found 30 different things about them that I could edify, that I could encourage? Like, would I have a better relationship with my kids at the end of the 30 days? Like, yeah, of course I would. Like, because I'm thinking about them, I'm praying about them, I'm encouraging them verbally, whatever. So now, instead of going, I want to be a better dad, which is too fuzzy, too vague, I've got a real thing I can do. Like, like same with, I did a 30-day goal to practice being less offended. I found myself getting very angry at very minor things. And I did not like that. I heard Earl Nightingale. I love old school, like, motivational dudes. Earl Nightingale said, essentially, the size of the person you become is based on the size of the problems you let impact you. And I was like, ooh, I'm a small man right now. I'm a real small man. Like, because, dude, we're on a podcast. This is such a silly thing. I got offended when a podcast I was going on wrote me this long email about how to use a mic. And I was like, I got a podcast. I have a mic. Like, dude, you would have thought they wrote it, Dear Idiot, the way I read it. Like, I added that. I was so offended. I wanted to be like, I have my own podcast. Like, it was like, that's such a small thing. It's so silly. So I made a goal for 30 days to practice overlooking offense. And they could be small ones. They could be big ones. So and then again, like, at the end of the month, I'm less angry. Like, so I took this fuzzy thing that was be less angry and I made it a tactical thing. And then 30 days later, like, what do you know? So that's what the book's about, is how do we do that with the things we care about?
Yeah, that's so good. So I want to leave listeners with some encouragement. You've already seen so many people from the group that you researched set goals and achieve them through this strategy that you've given. What's your hope for this book?
Easy. So 50% of the people in the survey, so 3,000 people, 50% said 50% of themselves is untapped. And the metaphor that made me think of was that's like walking down on Christmas morning and only opening half your gifts. Like, there's a big pile and you've got friends and family and neighbors, maybe even coworkers going, hey, those, like, we see something, like, those gifts are yours too in the corner. And for whatever reason, you're not opening those gifts. I think it would be amazing if you could use this book to open more of your gifts. And I think it would have changes in your life you can't even begin to understand right now. Changes you can't even begin to imagine. So that's my goal, is that people use this book to open up more of their gifts.
Love it. I love it. So listeners, let me talk straight to you right now. I'm going to let John share with you in just a minute how you can get in touch with him and find this book. But every book I've read from Jon Acuff, I have loved. And as I read the book, I laugh and I learn. If you like laughing and learning, this man's for you.
Oh, so thank you, Tim. Yeah.
Well, I mean that. I really do. So tell everybody where they can find you and where they can find this book. Yeah.
So the book is sold anywhere books are sold. If you're an audio person and if you're listening to a podcast, you're probably an audio person. I read the audiobook and we put 10 bonus stories in it. So it's really fun. It's really funny. So that's what I would say. Like, pick up a copy of the audiobook. You can find all my info at jonacuff.com. And I have a podcast called All It Takes Is a Goal, where I interview people about the goals they're working on.
That's so good. John, I'm honored to talk with you today.
Thanks for having me
with us and just making us laugh and learn. Look forward to the next time.
Wow, what an incredible conversation. If you enjoyed that like I did, I know you'll probably want to dig deeper. So if you want to find out more information about our guest today, check the show notes for more information about how you can stay in touch with what they're up to. Well, as always, if you would rate this podcast, give us 5 stars on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, we would greatly appreciate it. If you found this episode particularly helpful, share it with a friend. We would also appreciate that. If you want to stay connected with us online, we are at Growing Leaders and at Tim Elmore, pretty much everywhere you are. And then finally, if you have ideas for this podcast, maybe other people you think we should interview or subjects you think we should cover, shoot us an email. It's podcast@growingleaders.com. Thanks.